To them, you will obey or you will be hunted. And every day there's a new example, as they just try to remake everything that is part of a free society, not under their control, down to museums and zoos. Yes, zoos. Do you catch this one? That was in the utterly insane executive order Trump signed yesterday, directing Vice President J.D. Vance to crack down on the Smithsonian Institution by removing improper ideology from its museums, education and research centers, and the zoo. J.D. Vance is now going to patrol the zoo for improper ideology. Congratulations, Commissar. You've got the zoo portfolio. Yeah, it's absurd, and it's un-American. And I don't think most people like this. In fact, if you look at the polling, and you look at the protests right now, and you look at the town halls, Americans are waking up to that. They don't like it. That's why a Democrat took a state Senate seat this week in a Pennsylvania district that had been Republican held since 1979, in Lancaster, the heart of Amish country. And it is why Republicans are right now worried about a special election in the deep red Florida congressional district, once held by Trump National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, that he won by 30 points in the last election. And it is why Trump just pulled his nomination of Congresswoman Elise Stefanik to be UN ambassador, because he is worried about losing a special election in a district where she won last year by 24 points. So he needs her in Congress. All of this means we still do right now live in a free society. We still do live in a democracy where gravity, political gravity, exists. Elections can still blunt Donald Trump's attempts at dictatorship. And the question before us each and every day is whether enough people understand the stakes here to mobilize in time to stop him. Jamelle Bouie is an opinion columnist for the New York Times who's written extensively about Trump's anti-constitutional project, and he joins me now. You know, Jamelle, this question of control versus freedom strikes me as kind of fundamental. It's something you've written about. You've written about a lot in terms of the Project of Reconstruction, the founders, our sort of constitutional tradition, but it's so striking to me how Trump and Trump's MAGA ilk never talk about freedom. They don't really believe in it, and they don't cherish it or celebrate it, and they don't really even pay it any rhetorical mind, because what they want is control.
I think that's right. Not just control, but domination. They want, they believe that life is a hierarchy of sorts, that there are people who are naturally on the top and people who are naturally on the bottom, and those on the top have the right to dominate those on the bottom. And although, of course, this country has a shameful history of all kinds of terrible hierarchies, at least in theory, in our greatest aspirations, the idea is that, no, this is not a country of hierarchies, of some people that are naturally higher, some people that are naturally lower. All men are created equal. Or to borrow from one of my favorite presidents, Abraham Lincoln's view of the matter, which is that he would not want to be a master or a slave, neither a master nor a slave. And so the MAGA movement does not understand America in terms of freedom or any kind of equality between peoples. It's simply who's on top, who's on the bottom, who has the right to dominate, who has the right to control.
And this project of domination we see day by day, right? So any independent source of authority they're seeking to dominate. There's been the executive orders at law firms, some of whom have knuckled under, others whom, to their great credit, for instance, Wilmer and Hale, if I'm not mistaken, and Jenner and Block, who have sued, and they're like, no, this is unconstitutional. The press corps, here's Pam Bondi. Now they're very much targeted at the independent judiciary. Here's Pam Bondi, just the Attorney General of the United States, just flatly saying judges should be removed for ruling against Trump. Take a listen.
Many judges need to be removed, Judge Howell included, Judge Reyes, Judge Boasberg. These judges obviously cannot be impartial. They cannot be objective.
Any independent source of authority has to be removed.
Right. They want to make sure that no one can challenge them, but here's the thing. We do, as you said, still live in a free country for the most part, and they don't have any institutional authority to remove these judges. Their allies in Congress don't have the numbers to remove these judges. They can threaten law firms, they can threaten all kinds of civil society organizations, but they don't necessarily have the capacity to carry out those threats. This is why I find myself disappointed when institutions bend to Trump, because I think it's clear that he wants you to be afraid of his bark. All of what we've seen over the last 2 or 3 months is the administration barking as loudly and ferociously as it can to cow people into submission. But if you bark back, if you bite back, if you punch back, if you threaten back, the administration does back down, because they don't actually have the kind of political power, the kind of resources, the kind of legal authority to do a lot of what they want to do. They're relying on their targets obeying in advance, to use a bit of a cliche.
Well, we just saw an example of this, right? There's a new prime minister in Canada, Mark Carney, who replaced Justin Trudeau. Yesterday, he gave just a genuinely sort of shocking speech. I mean, it kind of knocked me back on my heels, where he said, essentially, the relationship we had is over between the U.S. and Canada. That relationship is done. They've destroyed it over there. Donald Trump has. We have to build a new one that's different. And, you know, basically telling Trump to go take a long walk off a short pier. And today, the president has a very conciliatory post on the internet about how we had a good conversation. It was just obvious that one led to the other, that the only thing they understand is essentially meeting fire with fire.
That's right. They only understand meeting fire with fire. And at least some people in the administration must understand that so much of the authority that, say, a president has isn't by legal means, it's by cooperation. So much of American power abroad is by cooperation.
Yes.
And if you're going to burn these bridges, destroy these relationships, do everything in your power to try to coerce other people have agency too. This is a thing that I'm not sure that they understand.
Yes.
From Trump to Elon to Stephen Miller to the whole gang, I do not think they understand that other people have agency too, and they can act.
That's exactly right. I think you're exactly right about that, particularly Musk, who doesn't think anyone has agency except for Elon Musk. Jamal Bowie, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Coming up, as Donald Trump shows his cards, the Democratic push to win some key elections, showing their agency in just a few days. That's next. NBC News reports tonight the Republican leadership team in the House of Representatives was planning a goodbye party next week for Representative Elise Stefanik of New York, who had been Trump's nominee for ambassador to the United Nations. But tragically, they're going to have to cancel that party. Congresswoman Stefanik is not going to be the ambassador after all, and she is definitely not upset at all about this. Totally okay change of plans.
I was honored to have earned that nomination by President Trump, and I'm proud to be one of his top allies on Capitol Hill. I have been proud to be a team player. The president knows that. He and I had multiple conversations today, and we are committed to delivering results on behalf of the American people.
I have been proud to be a team player is an all-time quote. It seems that Congresswoman Stefanik did indeed have multiple conversations with the president yesterday, as Axios reports, after she learned Trump was yanking her nomination, and I quote here, Stefanik was crushed and scrambled to reverse Trump's decision before he announced it on Truth Social. Sad horns. Now, the reason Stefanik lost out on that UN job with the big staff and cabinet-level appointment and the $16 million penthouse in Manhattan with the views of the East River is that Donald Trump is very worried about the very slim Republican margin in the House.
She was going to go to the United Nations, and I said, look, there's a lot of room for doing that or something else, but she's very popular in her district, and I didn't want to take a chance. And I said, Lise, would you do me a favor? We cannot take a chance. We have a slim margin. We don't want to take any chances. We don't want to experiment.
Just to translate the Trumpese there, Trump didn't think another Republican could hold Stefanik's seat in a special election. A seat, we should note, Stefanik won by 24 points back in November, okay? This is a red seat. And there is a very clear moral to this story. Democrats should be contesting basically every race everywhere. Republicans are seeing it in their districts or their constituents. They're scared of the consequences. And if they are worried about a district a Republican just won comfortably in upstate New York, there are definitely a whole bunch of other races across the country they're scared about too. Ken Martin is the chair of the Democratic National Committee, and he joins me now live from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Ken, it's good to have you on the program. Is that your takeaway or understanding, at least, of what happened with Elise Stefanik?
Well, clearly, you heard it directly from Donald Trump himself. The Republicans are running scared. I mean, what happened this week alone in Pennsylvania shouldn't surprise anyone, right? But clearly, it's got the Republicans running like they're behind, and they are behind. It sent a shiver down their spine. Look, what we just saw in Pennsylvania this last week, we won a plus 23% Republican district. Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, hasn't had a Democrat representing them since the 1880s, and we flipped this district in a surprise upset. You know, look, what we're seeing right now is Donald Trump is cratering. His numbers are at an all-time low. Elon Musk is very unpopular, and we're seeing a huge backlash to the administration's policies throughout this country. And so we know that, as I've said, I've been in 13 states now over the 6 weeks I've been chair, and we're seeing an energy we haven't seen in some time. People are energized. Democrats are energized. Republicans are demoralized, and independent voters are swinging our way. And as I've said, when you organize everywhere, you can win anywhere.
I want to stay on the Pennsylvania race you just mentioned for a second, because we had James Malone, the Democratic candidate who is now the state senator-elect from that district, on this program. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't think there was a Democrat on the ballot in 2024, or at least it has gone uncontested a lot. And I wonder if there's a lesson there about contesting every race, particularly in the environment we find ourselves in.
Well, you have to do that. We have to contest races everywhere. And I would say, even if it wasn't the environment we find ourselves in, part of the challenge for the Democratic Party is we give up on too many parts of this country. We have to organize not only in every zip code throughout this country, we actually have to organize up and down the ballot. Our own indifference to local elections, as an example, has meant that the conservative movement in this country has taken over some of the biggest school districts. And that's partly on us, because we're not contesting those races. And as a result, they're banning books, they're whitewashing history, they're attacking our children. So we have to contest races up and down the ballot in every public policy arena. And when we do, and when we find good candidates who represent those districts, we can win. And so we have to engage everyone, everywhere. I'm here in Florida right now. I'm going to be canvassing this weekend in those 2 Florida special elections. And yes, they're ruby red districts, but we've already seen positive movement in our direction. And if we continue to work and organize, we can win anywhere.
Yeah, I want to talk about one of those districts, Florida 6. That's where Mike Waltz vacated it. Randy Fine, who's a state legislator there, and seems to be not beloved by the Republicans there. Ron DeSantis wouldn't even deign to say his name. Josh Wheel's the Democratic candidate, who's a school teacher who's running. This is what Trump had to say about that race. I'm curious what you think of the expectation setting here. Take a listen.
When it comes to Florida, you have 2 races, and they seem to be good. It's a Trump plus 32 area. The one thing is they're spending like $12 million, and our candidate doesn't have that kind of money, spending much less than that, like maybe 1/12, about $1 million, a little bit more than $1 million. So the airwaves are blanketed, and you never know what happens in a case like that. I won it by 32 points, and it's very, very strong.
What do you see as the benchmark here for the Democrats?
Well, here's what I would say. I mean, the fact that Donald Trump is talking about this race is astounding. This is a race he won by 30-some-odd points, as he mentioned. The Republicans should win this easily, but they're clearly running scared right now, right? And we know that we are seeing momentum in this race. The fact is that, you know, they very well could lose one or both of these races next Tuesday. And as I've said to folks, let's engage. Let's volunteer. If you're listening right now, we have an opportunity to move the needle here, right? Because we know in low turnout elections, right, in special elections like this, I've seen us win special elections we were supposed to lose, and I've seen us lose special elections we should win. The reality is it's all about who shows up. And Democrats are energized. Republicans are demoralized, and independent voters are swinging our way because they're pissed off at Donald Trump and Elon Musk.
I'll never forget covering the aftermath of Scott Brown's upset victory in a special election in the Massachusetts Senate race in, what was it? It must have been 2010, the beginning of 2010, I think, right in that January or something like that. And that just changed the entire political world. of the Democratic Party, of Barack Obama's presidency after that. So one special election can do a lot. Ken Martin, who is down in Florida working on those two races in Florida, won 4-6. Thanks so much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Chris.
Still ahead. Does this look like the face of a man who would potentially commit a crime to try to swing an election? Why the Attorney General of Wisconsin is taking Elon Musk to court next.
I'm Dan Oliver, the owner and founder of Dan-O's Seasoning. TikTok helped Dan-O's grow from a one-man...
Deliver million-dollar checks to Wisconsin voters. Musk announcing he will hold a rally Sunday to give $1 million each to two voters in the state's hotly contested Supreme Court race. Musk's Political Action Committee has already spent more than $20 million supporting conservative candidate Brad Schimmel. Critics question whether these payments violate state law prohibiting giving anything of value to induce voting.
Early voting is through the roof ahead of Tuesday's Supreme Court election in the state of Wisconsin. Today, the Wisconsin Attorney General filed a lawsuit to stop what he says is Elon Musk's illegal plan to buy the vote. Wisconsin Attorney General Josh Kaul is seeking to stop the richest man in the world from his blatant attempt to violate state law with his egregious attempt to buy votes in a state Supreme Court election. The lawsuit citing Musk's posting last night that he would hold an event in Wisconsin on Sunday, 2 days before the election on Tuesday. It would be open only to those who have voted in the Supreme Court election, where he would personally hand over two checks for $1 million each in appreciation for you taking the time to vote, adding, "This is super important." Hours later, Musk deleted that post, replacing it with another message saying he was clarifying his offer that the $1 million winners would be instead two spokesmen for his petition to oppose activist judges. Ben Wickler's the chair of the Wisconsin Democratic Party, and he joins me now. Ben, I got to say, when I saw the Musk tweet about the voting prize this morning, I thought, well, I don't know Wisconsin election law, but that can't possibly be legal, but it looks like it's not.
No, it is blatantly, obviously, facially illegal, a felony in Wisconsin, a class 1 felony. You cannot offer something of monetary value worth more than $1 in order to induce someone to vote or to not vote. And this is $1 million times 2 if you go to his town hall as a registered voter. His deletion of his tweet doesn't do anything to the fact that he offered this $1 million prize, which is itself committing a crime in the state of Wisconsin to help, this is critical, to corruptly help Brad Schimmel win this election. Someone who's talked about buying knee pads so he could crawl on his knees and beg donors for donations to his campaign. This is part of a big corrupt scheme to buy this election, and Elon Musk is not above the law, especially not state law, which Donald Trump cannot pardon him for.
Yeah, we should say that him changing the wording to me doesn't do that much. I mean, it's like, oh, right, I forgot the legalistic loophole here that it's like you're to be a spokesperson. This is how we did it in Pennsylvania in the run-up to the election. On Musk, I mean, I don't think I've ever seen someone drop $20 million in a state Supreme Court race. I mean, maybe there's a record of that, but in Wisconsin politics, has this ever happened?
No. He's given, let me put it this way. The previous record, other than the Wisconsin 2023 Supreme Court race, for any judicial election in American history, was total spending was $15 million. Oh my God. Elon Musk in this race, it's $20 million through his different PACs. It's $3 million directly to the Republican Party of Wisconsin. And now he's given away $1 million in his first big check, and he's offering $2 more million. So that's $26 million, about a quarter of the total spending in this race from this one man to help Brad Schimmel to essentially buy the Wisconsin State Supreme Court, which helps Elon Musk with his lawsuit that's in the Wisconsin court system and also basically guarantees a vote for whatever Trump and Musk want. That is a colossal, almost like a picture book child's version of why Citizens United was a terrible idea. It illustrates why we need campaign finance reform. It also illustrates why we have to elect Susan Crawford to show that this kind of thing can backfire. And people can help at crawford4wi.com, by the way. If you want to help her fight back, you don't need to give $26 million to be able to beat Brad Schimmel.
Wisconsin, obviously, is a state, you're the state director there. It has had some real political success as a swing state in recent history. Multiple statewide Democratic elected officials, some who were reelected. Tammy Baldwin won a tight race, even in a year that Donald Trump won the state. But Donald Trump did win the state. It really is a swing state. as someone who just spends all your time talking to Wisconsinites and Wisconsin voters, like, what's your read of where things are right now, 60 days into this new administration?
People are furious about it. We've held People versus Musk town halls across Wisconsin. People come up, their voices trembling, talking about how their relatives were just laid off from the Social Security Administration, or they don't know how they'll be able to retire if Social Security is destroyed. Talking about the research that they do. I talked to a biochemistry guy at the University of Wisconsin. They had to withdraw the offers from all these incoming students all around Wisconsin in rural areas. People talking about the attacks on farmers and USAID shutting down means we're not buying food for the Food for Peace program. I mean, this directly affects people, and the fear about what could come next, attacks on healthcare, the Veterans Administration attacks, it has people in a state of panic, fear, and fury. And now Elon Musk wants his own justice, Brad Schimmel, to be the deciding vote on the Wisconsin State Supreme Court. So this has become a lightning rod in this race. It's almost a referendum on Trump and Musk in these first 60 days. And on the other side, we have a wall of money. So the question is, do money or do people rule the state of Wisconsin and, by extension, American politics? That is what is at issue on April 1st.
Final question on Musk. Musk has not just put his money here, which sometimes, though, these sort of secretive donors like the Mellon, the Mellon heir who puts his money, you never hear from the guy, right? Musk is like sort of running himself. How front of mind is that for voters? Like, how present is Musk as a phenomenon in this race?
So earlier today, I was in Kenosha, Wisconsin with Susan Crawford, the judge who's running for Supreme Court justice. And she went up in front of the room and she said, never did I think growing up as a little girl in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, that I'd be up against the world's richest man. And the room, erupted in applause. She's making really clear. This is a kind of Susan versus Goliath story in Wisconsin. And wherever I go, we talk to volunteers all over who are talking to voters. I'm knocking on doors. Voters are hearing about this. They know Musk is involved, and they want to fight back. It's to stop an abortion ban. It is to stop this corruption, and it is to send a message to the whole country that Elon Musk cannot just come in and buy whatever level of government that he wants and have his way. This is still something resembling a democracy, and people want to make sure that people power prevails over this flood of Elon Musk vote buying and bribery.
Man, everyone is going to be watching that state like a hawk on Tuesday night. Ben Wickler, thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Still this hour, wow, a lot happened today, and even more has happened tonight. Every Friday it's like this, but here we go. Ready? Tonight, a federal judge in New York has just blocked Trump from shutting down the Voice of America and firing its staff. Trump tried to do this 2 weeks ago, but tonight a judge ordered Trump that he cannot, quote, terminate, reduce in force, place on leave, or furlough the journalists and staff and engineers at Voice of America. The judge called what Trump is doing here, quote, a classic case of arbitrary and capricious decision-making. Trump also tried to shut down another part of the U.S. Agency for Global Media, Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty. Plaintiffs also sued to block Trump from shutting down those entities. Yesterday, after those plaintiffs had initial success in court in their case, Trump actually reversed that decision and let Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty stay open and stay funded. Pushback works. We have been closely watching the case of the Tufts University Fulbright scholar who was snatched off the street by masked officers. A bunch of things are happening in that case, and we are going to have a full update on that for you in just a moment. But I can tell you right now that a judge overseeing that case has just ordered that Trump is not allowed to deport that young woman. The courts have blocked him from sending her out of the country. Again, we will have more on that to come. Plenty of new detail on that case to bring you tonight. In a separate case, yet another federal judge has just issued a restraining order that blocks Trump from sending people to random third countries that they're not from. Like, for example, what he has done by sending hundreds of men who aren't from El Salvador to a prison in El Salvador. There is a separate court order that is blocking Trump from sending anybody else to that El Salvador prison the way that he did those several hundred men. It remains to be seen if the courts will also order Trump to return those men from El Salvador. But just in case Trump had designs on sending people to yet another random country to which the deportees had no connection, a federal judge tonight in Massachusetts has blocked him from doing that. Want more? There's more. Today, also, a federal judge has blocked Trump from shutting down the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Trump had tried to fire most of the people who worked there and then told the remaining people who were still there that they were not allowed to do any work. And then he shut down the physical headquarters of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. But now a federal judge has issued an injunction blocking Trump from doing any of that. She has, as of tonight, ordered Donald Trump to instruct the government to reinstate the employees of the CFPB and to preserve the agency's contracts and their data. CFPB employees, I should tell you, they have been showing up in person, packing the court hearings every day this case has been in court. Well, now the judge says those CFPB employees are likely to win this case on the merits. And so, as of now, they should consider themselves back on the job. But wait, there's more. On Trump's week one botched and incoherent order to cut off all federal spending, all federal grants, now a federal appeals court has upheld the lower court rulings that shut him down on that. On Trump's ham-handed White House proclamation that all so-called probationary employees had to be fired from multiple agencies. That's the one they soon realized was so blatantly illegal, they tried to take it back and pretend that it had just been a suggestion all along. Well, now a federal appeals court has upheld yet another of the lower court rulings that shut Trump down on that one as well. Oh, do you want more? Do you want more? Because there's more. Just before we got on the air tonight, we got a late night ruling from yet another federal judge who has issued yet another ruling blocking Trump, this time on one of his authoritarian fantasy executive orders by which he targeted a major mainstream U.S. law firm. Trump started issuing these one-by-one executive orders going after law firms, basically to try to scare the legal profession into not bringing cases against him in court, into not representing people or entities who Trump is targeting. He's been trying to intimidate the legal profession and individual law firms one by one so that he can get his way without having court challenges to things that he does that are illegal. Two major U.S. law firms, I think, have effectively destroyed themselves, have destroyed their own reputations and made themselves, I think, basically indelibly infamous by going to Trump, going to the White House and begging Trump to not target them, promising to do tens of millions of free legal work for his chosen causes. The firms Skadden Arps and Paul Weiss are the two firms that have chosen to do that, have chosen that attempt to get out of Trump's, opprobrium, right? I think Skadden Arps and Paul Weiss have destroyed their reputations by doing that. I think probably they thereby have destroyed their own businesses by doing that. If that's what they chose to do. In contrast, you've got firms like Jenner and Block, who went straight to court and said, actually, no, we're not going to beg. We're going to go fight this. And we're going to fight this like you can't believe. Because you know what we're good at? Fighting illegal stuff in court. Well, tonight, a judge has ruled in favor of Jenner and Block and blocked Trump's executive order against them. The judge in that case said Trump's attack on the firm violates the First, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments of the U.S. Constitution. I said there are two firms tonight that we are watching because they chose to fight, unlike Paul Weiss, unlike Skadden Arps. Jenner and Block and WilmerHale chose to fight. Jenner and Block got that order tonight, blocking Trump's executive order. The second firm, WilmerHale, the judge hearing their case tonight said in court that he wasn't going to rule from the bench, but he also said in open court that he was inclined to issue an order against Trump in their case as well. I will tell you, we had a reporter in the courtroom for that. Our reporter notes that the courtroom for this hearing this evening was packed with lawyers from WilmerHale, all there in person to stand behind their firm's decision to fight. And now it looks like they're going to win, too. Just moments ago, just before we got on the air, we got this written ruling from that judge. And just like with Jenner and Block, in the WilmerHale case, the judge is also blocking Trump's executive action against the firm in part. So both firms that fought against Trump's executive orders here won tonight in court. You don't always win when you fight, but you always lose every time you don't. So happy Friday. Donald Trump is having a terrible day. Have you ever heard of Peebles, Ohio? It's Peebles, Peebles, Ohio. It's in Appalachia. It's a village. It's a town of about 1,700 people. In that little town of 1,700 people in deep, deep red Adams County, Ohio, look at this. They're out protesting Trump on the street now. Their congressman is Republican David Taylor. You can see the sign there. MIA, missing in action, Congressman David Taylor. Your constituents would like a word with you. In Fort Bend County, Texas, they've also got a Republican congressman there, Troy Nehls. Troy Nehls will also not meet with his constituents back home. So last night in Fort Bend County, Democrats Beto O'Rourke and Tim Walz held their own town hall in Troy Nehls' district in Texas. Something like 2,000 people showed up. You won't show up and meet with your constituents? Well, the Democrats will do it for you then. In Grand Rapids, Michigan last night, Democratic Congresswoman Hillary Scholten had more than 1,000 people show up at her own town hall at a local high school. A day after announcing with glee that he is firing thousands of people from the Department of Health and Human Services, and as we are still getting in reports about kids turning up with liver damage in Texas because their parents have inadvertently poisoned them by following quack health advice from Trump's health secretary, Bobby Kennedy Jr., Kennedy today turned up in Martinsburg, West Virginia for an event with that state's Republican governor. Even in Martinsburg, West Virginia, the locals were there to greet him. See the sign there? With Governor Morrissey and RFK, measles and polio are here to stay. Hands off our democracy. Today at the Department of Education in Washington, D.C., this was the scene as employees that Trump has fired from the Education Department were allowed to collect their things and leave. People turned out on the street outside the Education Department headquarters to thank them for their work, to cheer for them. Trump's efforts to shut down the Education Department and fire all its employees are being challenged in court. He has asserted that he is closing the Education Department. But you know what? The Department of Education was not created by Donald Trump. It was created by the United States Congress and is funded by Congress. And so it is Congress, not Donald Trump, that will have the last word on whether or not the Education Department is in fact shut down. But as he wages war against the Education Department in this country, people are turning out to support the people who work there. Trump's top campaign donor, Elon Musk, found himself in legal jeopardy today, or at least apparent legal jeopardy, when he tried to pull another one of his stunts in which he effectively sort of pays voters. The Wisconsin Attorney General immediately went to court and said under Wisconsin state law, it does not matter if you are Donald Trump's top campaign donor, Elon Musk. It is still illegal to offer people money for voting. Elon Musk quickly deleted his tweet from earlier today saying that he was going to come to Wisconsin with $1 million checks. He tried to recast the whole $1 million check scheme as something totally different than what he had initially announced. Ahead of Elon Musk's planned campaign trip to Wisconsin to try to boost the pro-Trump judge they're trying to get onto the state Supreme Court there, this plane has meanwhile been flying all over the state. It's towing a banner that says, "Go home, Elon. Vote Susan." Susan is Susan Crawford, the judge who is running against the Musk MAGA candidate in Wisconsin. That race is Tuesday. But early voting has already started in the Wisconsin State Supreme Court race. Donald Trump's continuing and now escalating tariff gambit sent inflation metrics up today. It also sent his gambit on tariffs also sent the markets off a cliff. The Dow dropped more than 700 points today. The S&P 500 dropped nearly 2%. The NASDAQ drop was closer to 3%. Well done on the whole tariffs thing. And of course, today was the day that Donald Trump sent his vice president, cute coat, to Greenland. Now, this was supposed to be initially a kind of extended soft power charm offensive visit by the vice president's very charming wife. But That led to embarrassing headlines about American officials being unable to find a single Greenland resident who was willing to speak with her on her visit. No business agreed to host her on her visit. Even the dog sled race that she said she wanted to attend made clear that she had not been invited and they did not plan to host her at the event. Residents of Greenland are so disgusted by the Trump administration's insistence that the U.S. is somehow going to get their country, somehow going to take Greenland, that there were plans for protests of Usha Vance's visit, from her landing at the airport, on the roads from the airport to the Capitol, and along the Capitol's streets. And so they decided, hey, maybe let's not do that. In the end, instead, they decided to pare the visit way back. They decided to send her husband, the vice president, with her. And they sent the Vances only to a U.S. airbase that is literally 1,000 miles from the Capitol, where the protests were expected. As the New York Times put it, they sent them to this airbase, quote, where distance from any population center and high fences assured there would be no visible dissent. Greenland is part of Denmark. If Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are going to take Greenland somehow, which they keep insisting, the most obvious route to doing that would be a war with Denmark, I guess, which is part of NATO and is ostensibly our ally both individually and as part of NATO. But to that point, our alliance with them, I want you to watch this. This is a man named Rufus Gifford. He was chief of protocol in the Biden administration. He was also America's ambassador to Denmark under President Obama. And I just want you to watch his reaction to what Trump and Vance are doing here with this stunt, with this threat, which they are now escalating. Watch.
Hi, y'all. Okay, so to say I'm a bit worked up this morning is an understatement, and that's because of this. Yesterday, the Vice President of the United States goes on Fox News and says that Denmark is not a very good ally. Now, I know that a lot of people would know how I feel about this, but I want to tell you why. And it is in part because, yes, I was the one for a number of years that would go to the prime minister or the foreign minister or the defense minister and ask on behalf of the United States government for them to send their young men and women to Iraq to fight ISIS, to help go remove chemical weapons from Syria, to go fight Ebola in Africa. I did it every time, and every single time they said yes, and they said yes without hesitation, and in part because it was the United States of America, a great ally, asking them to do it. And for them to hear today that now the Vice President of the United States is saying that they are not a good ally when they have lost more people per capita, young men and women, in Afghanistan than any country other than the United States of America, it is just shameful. I have been to these funerals. I've heard stories of young men who've had their legs blown off by IEDs in Afghanistan, of young men who've had to go through numerous surgeries and now live in constant pain because of something that happened to them on the battlefield. For them and their families to now hear the vice president talk like this is just heartbreaking. And honestly, like Americans, we have to show outrage to our European partners. This is shameful, and this is a moral shortcoming. And honestly, look, we understand that the reason he's saying it is because they are not bending the knee to Trump's authoritarian, imperialistic takeover of Greenland. We get that. But at some point, this is about something so much bigger. This is about the men and women. I hope that J.D. Vance could say this not just to the face of Maria Bartiromo, but go to Denmark and say that to the face of the parents of the young men and women who've lost their lives alongside U.S. troops. Say it to them. And then you will have just an ounce of courage. But until then, it is just shameful. And look, Americans, we need to show a little outrage here. Our partners and allies expect it from us, and they deserve better.
Joining us now is Rufus Gifford. He's America's former ambassador to Denmark. Ambassador Gifford, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you don't mind that we stole that from what you posted online. I thought a lot more people needed to see it.
No, thank you, Rachel. It's important to hear, and very few people have had the perspective that I've had, and have had the honor and privilege of serving the United States, of having been to Greenland for 9 times, of understanding the political complexity of the Arctic and the relationship between Denmark and Greenland, and how important the United States is to the people both of Denmark and Greenland. So it is heartbreaking to me, and I so appreciate you inviting me on here today to talk a little bit about it.
Well, I feel like a lot of our discussion about this crazy scenario we find ourselves in has been about the how Trump's fixation on Greenland, where did it come from? Where did he get this idea? How non-viable this idea seems, how any potential path toward him getting what he wants seems like it would be impossible for him to get, the catastrophic consequences of a potential war with Denmark, with a NATO ally, if that's what he felt like he needed to do, and that is indeed what he's threatened to get it. But I feel like what we haven't talked about is what these threats from him have already done to our alliances, to our standing in the world, and to what we are able to accomplish in the world as the United States of America. And I feel like you're really the first person who I've heard talk about that in really granular terms, in terms of what damage has already been done. Do you think that's sort of that's the more appropriate ground for the national conversation we're having about this?
I so love this conversation because I think it's what matters. American diplomacy, the reason why American diplomacy has been so meaningful over the course of the last 80 years is because of the human relationships that we have built across nations. The soft power that the United States has exhibited over the course of that time we have built friendships and loyalty, the likes of which we've never seen before on the world stage. And what breaks my heart in this, Rachel, is after that video that you posted, which I obviously somewhat spontaneously recorded after the Vance comments, are the messages that I've received from Europeans, and not just Danes, because the video did go viral. And the messages you receive back are so sad, because these are countries that absolutely love the United States at our core. That because we have been there for them and they have been there for us. And now this is the thing, we're not just losing the governments. And that's what I want Americans to know. We're not just losing the prime ministers, we're not just losing the defense ministers. There's lots of talk about that. The problem is we're losing the trust and respect of the people on the ground, the soldiers who sacrificed proudly alongside young American men and women fighting wars that we asked them to fight. And when they are disrespected, when their countries are disrespected, those real men and women, they feel disrespected personally as well. And that's been my experience over the course of the last 2 months. And I speak out, Rachel, because I think our European partners, as I said in the video, deserve better. But they also have to hear Americans speak out. Meaning they have to hear Americans remind the world that we still respect their sacrifice and partnerships. And that's why I do it. And that's why I'm so grateful to be able to have this conversation, because it is so much more than just the granular actions, which I think you led into this conversation so beautifully, because I agree with every word of it. But we don't talk enough about the human cost, which is happening day after day after day.